very good morning to everyone. My name is Sim Lee Min from OUMH1303. Today, I would like to talk about the good practices for virtual classroom. When we talk about virtual classroom, the first things come to our mind is online courses or online environment, but it has actually much broader dimensions. Most of us has been teaching online for a while since the start of MCO, or our children or we were asked to continue our studies online or e-learning. So, what is virtual classrooms? What are the good practices for virtual classroom? I do hope at the end of the presentation, you will at least grab hold of one of the practices I'm going to share. The virtual classroom is an e-learning concept whose prime objective is to enable the teachers and the students to impart and perceive education online, respectively, principally over the internet. As teachers, surely, we have taught online classes during this time when all schools across the nation closed in order to try to stop the spread of COVID-19. Most of us maybe took a week or two to take a deep breath, plan, and then took the plunge to embrace virtual teaching. Maybe some of us are still sketching our heads and wonder how to make it work better. I do hope after listening to me, it will help you to have some tips on how to have effective practices for our students. And today, I'm here to share some tips with you. First, be more of yourself. As teachers, we have our own style in the classroom and we are comfortable with our personal style. So, when it comes to virtual classroom, the trick is to also develop an online style to be able to be more of yourself. You need to know your tool, the tool that you can use help, especially if you provide your students with some suggestions and ground rules for how to interact in your classroom. I believe all of us here said this before. Off your microphone, please. This can be one of the rules. All should off their microphones unless they want to speak. You should stay true to your own teaching style. Then, this will turn into a behavior of learning among your students. According to behaviorism educational theory, behaviorism examines how students behave while learning. It focuses on how learners respond to certain stimuli. When the teachers repeat the stimuli, they can observe, control, and modify the learner's individual behavior. Learners do what they are instructed to do and are only prepared to reproduce basic facts and automatically perform tasks. Once you start to have a sense of this style, abbreviate it. Here are some tips you can project your personal style. You can tell brief, anecdotal stories or use analogies to demonstrate your point. But please do not tell stories that are not related to the learning topics. You can be more of yourself if you are familiar with your material. So, practice until you are comfortable with your material so that your delivery can be clear. Do not confuse clarity with dullness. For dry and boring topics, use relevant example, brief anecdotes, virtual to maintain clarity in your delivery. Do have the habit of letting your students know if you need a minute to prepare something. Tell your students what is about to happen. Do not allow silence to last long. Do not speak haltingly while multitasking. Become comfortable using your web camera. Use your camera and introduce yourself briefly. This is to bring a personal feel to the classroom. Second, engage our students often. It is important for us to engage our students in our virtual classroom. Have you ever played the kids game Duck Duck Goose or Drop Handkerchief? It is a traditional children's game. A group of children sit in a circle, facing inward, while another player, who is called as it, walks around and tapping on each player in turn, calling duck, until finally calling one goose. The goose will rise and tries to catch it, while it tries to return to and sit where the goose had been sitting before. If it succeeds, the goose will become the it. In this game, everyone must pay close attention every round, because no one knows when his moment to run will arrive. Consider the participant state in the game is recreated in your virtual classroom. How can you make it feel as though everyone is an important contributor within your classroom and could be called upon at any time to actively participate? One way to make everyone feel as an important part of the learning community in your virtual classroom is to encourage and direct hands-on activities. We talk a lot about boosting interaction in the virtual classroom. Interaction provides learners with the opportunity to communicate during the events amongst themselves and with the facilitators, often through technology. We can use chat, emoticons, polls, whiteboards, breakout rooms, application sharing, and web browsing. Interaction keeps our program moving. It motivates our learners to stay awake. So how? What shall we do? We can try concurrent engagement. Activities that engage all participants at one time constitute concurrent engagement. Using concurrent engagement helps all learners feel important, as everyone has the same voice and their opinions have the same value. It works well for brainstorming and other learner-centric activities. We need to learn how to facilitate this engagement technique. Since we can't present as much content as we would if we didn't include these activities in our designs. Remember, adding some slides and clicking through them is not an accelerated learning technique. With all interactions and collaboration, people need time to process and practice and interact and ask questions for learning to really happen. Design these opportunities into your virtual learning programs and be aware of your students and engage your students and give your students room to practice and try. Third, be aware. A good teacher pays attention to his students. Questions and comments do not necessarily need to be addressed immediately, but a teacher should set respectful ground rules to outline how questions will be handled. In a virtual classroom, this ability to respond to questions and feedback is even more important. If you have encouraged your students to actively participate, so you need to react to their participation. When students raise their hands, send chat messages, or provide other forms of feedback, you need to first be aware that some things need your attention. Here are some tips that you can stay aware of your students. Do keep your eye on the room. Scan the windows to see if any new indicators have appeared. If it is appropriate, acknowledge a question or comment or even answer it right away. Simple acknowledgement helps the classroom feel alive and your student feels like he isn't alone either. Don't give your students the impression you are going to ignoring them. Try to avoid looking down at notes for a long time or staring at wall. You will lose many opportunities to interact with your students. Do use a moderator or co-instructor if the group is large, the topic is complex, or if you are new to the online classroom or teaching a new topic for the first time. Don't let questions and feedback go completely without acknowledgement for very long in a teaching and learning scenario. Don't take a complicated questions in the middle of getting your point across, and don't allow questions to rewrite your class. A common complaint from students is the dissatisfaction with rushing through substantial topics later in the classroom because we've run out of time, and often the time used earlier was poorly managed. Teachers should avoid dominating the discussion. One of the problems that often overlooked in a language classroom is the amount of the time the teachers talk. Not only does this significantly reduce students' participation in lessons and demotivate them, but also it denies students opportunities to practice their speaking and critical thinking skills. So teachers, be aware of your students' presence in your virtual classrooms. As a conclusion, many suggestions have been made above for how you can use your own style to draw in your audience. Engage your students and manage two-way communications in class, and be aware of their presence and eliminate concerns that you may just be taking to yourself rather than a captive audience. Try the suggestions that work for you, your schools and your learning goals, and dismiss or ignore the ones that don't. Be creative and remember that the extra effort to practice and prepare will go a long way toward improving your online teaching skills and hopefully students' enjoyment. All this won't happen overnight. If you enter a basketball game, knowing you've prepared by practicing your offensive and defensive plays, you've compete with much more confidence. The same goes for teaching. Benjamin Franklin once said, "If you fail to prepare, you are preparing to fail." You teach with confidence when you've prepared because you know yourself well and you know your lesson well. Thank you.